So happy holidays, everyone. I want to begin, obviously, from a place of gratitude. This is that time of year, and I want to just share a gift that my wonderful friend Marcia gave me just before. So we'll see whether I live up to the mug. I don't know whether that will be the case. And I've got my timing here, so I know how long to speak. So certainly, the topic of faith. You guys don't give me the easy ones. I don't get the softball ones for sure. Last time I think was peace. So between every time I come here, hopefully we'll get closer to figuring out what all of this is about. So I want to start from a slightly different place, and one that may surprise you, because as you'll see from the first text in front of you, this is not a Jewish text. However, it does appear in our prayer book, the one that we use at our synagogue in Sag Harbor. It was written by a UU minister named Kenneth Patton, who I sadly was not familiar with before, but now I am enamored with. And truth be told, if the only thing we did this morning was to just read this poem and sit here for the next 15 or so minutes thinking about it, I think that would be a sufficient teaching. So I'm going to do my best to read it. Poetry is not my area of expertise, but I will try to capture it. Doubting is but the forefront of faith, a faith in the infinite growth of an unbounding creation. A doubting age is one of restlessness and discontent with what is current. A doubt is an idea that is still alive. To doubt that the past has uncovered all things is to express faith that many things are still to be uncovered. To doubt that we have grown to our full stature and knowledge is to express faith that we may develop into beings of such power and dignity that we cannot as yet imagine what shall be. So I don't know if you feel the same way about this that I do, but I think it's stunning. But I think it speaks to a reality that transcends any religious identity, any spiritual identity, which is the acknowledgement of the fact that there is not a single person who has lived their life from the moment they were born to the moment that they pass in which they have lived a full, faithful life, whatever that may be. Doubt is an essential part, at least according to this poem, of our existence. But of course, we set up what seems like an impossible paradigm. How can we be doubting people and faithful people at the same time? So I want to try to explore this concept a little bit and hopefully to give us all a little bit of comfort to know that if we're in the doubting phase of our existence, whether it's this morning or this year or this part of our life, that's okay. We'll get there. So I want to go back, though, a little bit further and to say that if we're going to take the traditional Jewish lens, faith is kind of an important thing. So as you'll see in our second reading, all right, a little tongue-in-cheek of a question, it is an important deal. And when you talk about matters of faith in Judaism, there is generally one person that you go to as the sort of understanding where is the traditional line, and that is a wonderful rabbi named Maimonides, Rabbi Moshe Bar Maimon, Rambam, depending on how you know him. And he's living in roughly 13th century, mostly in Spain, eventually into northern Africa, eventually finds his way to the land of Israel. But ultimately speaking, Maimonides is really the sort of theologian and philosopher par excellence in Judaism. And one of his great tasks was trying to take these big ideas and to make them digestible for the average person. But where he starts off is the basis for all of his thinking, all of his theology, all his philosophy, and it's not just his. It's the traditional understanding in Judaism of how we understand this idea of faith or belief. So in one of his very popular books, Maimonides writes, "It is the foundation of all foundations and the pillar of wisdom to know that there is a first cause," which is a euphemism for God, "who created everything that exists, and it is a positive commandment to know this, as it says in the Torah in the book of Exodus, 'I am Adonai your God.'" So fairly straightforward, right? What is Maimonides saying here? He's basically saying all of the laws, the particular nature of Judaism, the way we pray, the way we eat, the way we think, the way we live our lives, all of it basically comes from this first idea, that we have a complete, unquestioning faith that there is one God, and that God is the creator of every single thing, every atom, every piece of food we put in our mouths, our bodies, everything from now until the end of existence. So that's our starting point. It's a little heavy. It's a little challenging. Okay, so we're going to try to work from there, but it's important to understand sort of, where the, I won't use the word extremes, but the extremes of the situation ultimately are. So I want to go on to the next page, and this is a rabbi that I'd be very surprised if anybody in the room was familiar with, but this is sort of like when I was a kid, it's what you call a deep cut. Right? When you're finding the rabbis that people haven't heard of and you bring them out, that's who this is. So Rabbi Chazdai Kreskis, who was, believe it or not, they had things called crown rabbis. He was the crown rabbi of the Kingdom of Aragon in Spain in the 1300s, dies in the early 1400s. And he is also one of the great sort of theologians and philosophers of medieval Judaism. This one's a little bit more complicated, but I want to kind of walk us through this. So the question at hand really is faith even a matter of choice? Do we have a choice about that? So he says, first of all, and this is part of a larger conversation about reward and punishment, we'll leave that for another time of year. How could there be reward and punishment for beliefs relating to the Torah? Right? This is specific in our language, but I want you to think more generally of wherever your faith background may be. In other words, a faith in the absolute truth and validity of our tradition, our teachings that is embodied in the Torah. It is made clear in the tradition that punishment for a lack of faith is extraordinary. In other words, you won't get a share in the world to come. That's the euphemism in Judaism for whatever we believe to be the next stage of existence of heaven, whatever you might want it to be. In other words, if you're not a faithful person, you're not getting there in the end. That's what he's sort of saying here. Okay? But we clearly see that desire and choice in matters of faith have no sway whatsoever. Because when a person believes something, they experience that belief as compelled and entirely unchosen. How much more so when they have compelling, inescapable reasons, irrefutably proving it to be true. In these situations, they feel clearly, perceptibly, and viscerally compelled to believe, and it is simply impossible for them to believe the opposite. For desire and choice have no effect on beliefs. Beliefs are not a matter of choice, and desire cannot act upon them. Now, however we may feel about this, some of us may nod our heads, some of us may be challenged by this. That's the beauty of Judaism, and that's the beauty of our conversation right now. You don't have to accept everything that Kreskes teaches. You certainly don't have to accept everything that Rabbi Dan teaches. But I think he's talking about something that is fundamental for all of us to consider. Right? We oftentimes convince ourselves that we are the masters of our own existence, of our own brain, our own feelings. We can will ourselves or compel ourselves to be kinder, to be more thoughtful. And in many cases, that is true. But in matters of faith, it's much more complicated than that. And I would challenge anyone who sort of said that today I'm going to say, okay, Sunday, December 22nd, 2019, I'm going to become a faithful person. I'm going to go out today, and that is going to be how I define myself. I'm going to make that happen. I'm going to manufacture that. And what Kreskes is basically saying, again, whether we agree with him 100% or not, is that actually when it comes to matters of faith, it's not that simple. It's not something that we can go to the store and buy. It's not something that we can find a kit to create. It is something that oftentimes, and more often than not, emerges in us, and emerges in us for all sorts of complicated, interconnected reasons. So the idea that we can somehow or another, right, reach this Maimonidean idea of perfect, absolute faith all the time, in every moment of our life, is something of a wonderful fallacy, right? Some imagination that we just actually can't necessarily achieve, at least not in that kind of way. So by definition, by this point, what we can say to ourselves, we can take a little bit of breath to say, okay, wait a minute. So if this is true, then that means there must be some acceptable part of our life in which doubting and being unsure is not just acceptable, but expected. And then, in fact, as we will get to our next teaching, essential and necessary. So I'm bouncing around quite a lot here. You get some Jewish stuff and you get some decidedly not. But if you don't know Kierkegaard, you should all go home and read Kierkegaard later today. Okay? That should be your task, if nothing else. Okay? But Kierkegaard, again, has a resonance in Judaism, right? That actually a lot of the modern philosophers of Judaism really look to Kierkegaard for, even outside of our tradition, for understandings of our own words and our own ways of thinking. And this, again, Kierkegaard's, you need an expert to really unpack everything that he's trying to say, and I'm certainly not an expert. But I love this imagery that he gives us. So he says, without risk, there is no faith. If I am capable of grasping God objectively, in other words, if I can scientifically or unequivocally prove without any emotion whatsoever that God exists, by almost definition, I do not believe. But precisely because I can't do this, I must believe. Take a second to sort of think about what it is that he's saying there. Right? His entire faith is based on the fact that he is unsure, and he is not definite, and he can't say for certainty what it is. And if I wish to preserve myself in faith, I therefore must constantly be intent upon holding fast the objective uncertainty, so as to remain out upon the deep, over 70,000 fathoms of water, still preserving my faith. I don't know if that hits you the way that it hit me, but that's powerful. Right? That image of just sort of being in a place in which you are totally vulnerable. But the only way to really understand the deepest sense of what our existence is about, this word that we call faith, is to be in a vulnerable place, to be in a place in which we feel like at any moment, right, the ground can give out underneath us, the ice can give out underneath us. I love that, right? Because usually when we hear the words doubt or uncertainty, Our association emotionally is fear. Our association is discomfort. And what Kierkegaard is saying here is that there may be fear and there may be discomfort, but there is also an openness. There is a freedom that comes with this idea that I don't have to know everything at every moment. I don't have to be able to say I am 100% in faith of whatever it is that I do believe in. And I think that's extremely important. So let's go on to the last page here, and let me just see how I'm doing. Okay, good. For me, I'm ahead of time. I'm very happy about this. So this is a poem from, I think if he's not described this way, it's the way I would think to describe him, Yehuda Amichai, who was the poet laureate of the state of Israel. He was born in the 1920s in Germany, and like many, we don't have to fill in the details of what that story entailed. But by the time he found his way to Israel, he contained all of the complexities, certainly around the question of faith. Right? How does one experience something like the Holocaust and come out of it on the other side a faithful person? This is the basis of many, many, many discussions within the Jewish world, within the theological world in general. Right? How do we respond to a tragedy of that magnitude? So he writes this piece of poetry, which I really just, I love. And he says, I declare with perfect faith that the prayers preceded God. The prayers created God, and God created human beings. And human beings creates the prayers that created God, that created human beings. So I will sidestep the complicated theology of what Amichai is saying here, right? In another era, right, a statement like this, even tongue-in-cheek, would have been considered heretical. Right? Remembering for most of the last 2,000 years, organized religion has not had an easy time with anybody questioning the order of things. Okay? Obviously, every religion has a different definition, but basically all of it comes back to the same idea, right? This Maimonidean concept, right? That religion is based on faith, and faith must be absolute in order for religion to exist, and it's a whole circle like this. But here, Amichai kind of toasts everything on its head, right? He's sort of saying, well, actually, forget about the order. Forget about exactly how it comes around. Don't see it in a linear path. Right? We are part of a cycle of which our entire life may be filled with, again, moments of great connection to our faith and moments in which we find ourselves in the opposite direction. And the key question here, which is the thing I put at the very top, is fundamentally, and I find this happens a lot with people that I speak to, is if they say to me, you know what, I'm not sure about any of this stuff, right? I don't know. I'm looking at this prayer book. There's all this business about God creating things. I don't necessarily believe that. So how is it that I'm supposed to sit here and use these words of prayer? How does that work for me? Well, it's disingenuous. It feels disingenuous. And I remember that there's a great anecdote about my father's teacher, a guy named Rabbi Heschel, who I think I talked about last time that I was here a little bit. And his students came up to him once and they said, Rabbi Heschel, you pray 3 times a day, every single day of your entire life. Do you speak to God every single time? And he takes a moment and he strokes his beard and he says, no. But if I didn't pray, I may never have that opportunity. Right? So that's a sort of amazing thing when you think about it. We oftentimes shut ourselves off and out to experiences because we convince ourselves we are not up to whatever the bar is. Right? It's like being at the amusement park. Right? You're not tall enough to ride this spiritual ride. Okay? That is a complete and utter fallacy. Okay? It is not, and I repeat this, it is not a part of a faithful life. It is not reasonable to expect that we are going to be able to live every breathing moment of our life in complete and utter certainty about our Creator, about our spirituality, about our faith, about anything. Right? That is really actually the antithesis of what human existence is about, and it is the antithesis, at least what I believe, and what my teachers believe, about the place of religion in our lives, and the place of spirituality in our lives. It is not meant to be the answer to a question. It is meant to be a road to asking more questions. That is fundamental. So it's the last text here. I'll bring us all, to a conclusion of some sort, I hope. But I just want everybody, if nothing else, if you feel uncomfortable, if you ever felt like, I'm the only person in the room who doesn't feel like I have full faith in whatever it is. So here we only need to look at the most Reverend Justin Welby, the current Archbishop of Canterbury. Now again, you'd think very strange, the rabbi comes and gives you all of these people who are not Jewish, but I thought this was really quite wonderful. So this was an interview that he gave in a cathedral of all places in September 2014, in which he remarked, the other day I was praying over something as I was running, and I ended up saying to God, look, this is all very well and good, but isn't it about time you did something if you're there? So if the Archbishop of Canterbury, the head of, well, I'd say, other than the Queen, the head of the Anglican Church, the Church of England, one of the largest churches in the entire world, can say in a cathedral in front of a room full of people, and now the entire world, that he's not entirely sure what's going on here, then I think at the very least all of us can leave here today feeling okay with the fact that if maybe we have some questions about what's going on. And I think that especially as we know, we're living in a day and age that in one case is certainly on par with history, but in another case is sort of unprecedented. And I think going back to our original poem, right, the restlessness of our existence currently is a great challenge to many of us. I hope to all of us. That struggle of understanding, how do we live as people of, again, I'll put faith in quotation marks, whatever it might be, whatever our background might be, our belief might be today. How do we live in this world in which we see, right? I'm praying every time I open up our prayer book, right? Thanking God for all of these things, and then going out and seeing all of these things that were created being destroyed. So how do we maintain our sense of faith, our sense of gratitude to God, our sense of appreciation, our sense of connection, when our eyes and our ears and our hearts are being torn apart by seeing the way that human beings relate to each other, the way that we embody the worst of our characteristics instead of the best? And I think part of the challenge has grown out of the fact that for much of the last 2,000 years, and perhaps more than that, it's because we have given over to, I think, a fallacious idea that so long as our faith is maintained, so long as our absolute clarity of belief is maintained, then everything else will follow as a result of that. That our behaviors will follow as a result of that, our laws will follow as a result of that. And I don't think that that actually has served us well. And I think actually, I've been asked many times, what is it I love about being Jewish? What does Judaism mean to me? And beside the familial relationship, the cultural relationship, the personal spiritual relationship, the thing that I think it has taught me more than anything else is the value of questioning, the value of doubting, the value of pursuing answers that I don't have at this particular moment. And not to feel uncomfortable about it, not to feel diminished by it, not to feel less than, but actually to be empowered and to be given that image again of Kierkegaard out on the ice. Right? Knowing I may be afraid. There may be days where I have to stand up in front of a room full of people, everyone looking to me to be the representation of what faith is meant to look like, and know in my heart that I am in one of those moments where I am not sure, or I'm struggling. Right? Priests, reverends, imams, monks, every one of us struggles in the same way. And we don't do ourselves or our communities a service by trying to act as if we are not struggling. That's what I appreciated so much about the Archbishop's comments, was the genuineness and the seriousness and the authenticity and even the humor with which he shared what actually is a rather profound statement. That he, the embodiment of the church, me, certainly not an embodiment of anything other than, what I hope is some aspect of the rabbinate, but to be able to stand up in front of a room full of people and confidently and comfortably say that I'm not sure, I'm not always sure, but there are times where I am. There are times where my faith hits me right in the heart. There are times in which I am inspired by the best that we can produce. And that, I believe, is animated and served and grown by this word faith. It's going to be different for every one of us. There's no question. If we went around the room right now and had the open conversation, you would not hear two people speak the same way. That's not a bad thing. That's a beautiful thing. So the key piece is, whatever you might do, especially this time of year, right? Whatever your background is, wherever you find yourself, don't apologize for it. Don't feel bad about it. Love it. Appreciate it. Right? Doubting is but the forefront of faith. These things are related to each other. Don't make them seem separate. Don't make them seem at opposite with each other. Embrace it. Love it. Be faithful. Be doubtful. Be yourselves. That is all that any of us can ask. With that, I thank you, and I think I may have even finished a minute before my time. So.